Every home has a story, and just like with people, the older the home, the more stories there are to tell. In this series, I select historic homes from cities and towns across the U.S. and explore the history of its past inhabitants, imagining all the moments that have been lived within their walls, from holiday celebrations to last breaths, and perhaps determine who still calls this home. In this episode, we will be exploring this home in Salem, Massachusetts, which was built in 1885. It has 1,322 square feet with 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Salem is infamous for the Salem witch trials, which took place here in 1692, when 19 people were executed for being found guilty of witchcraft. While there are many older and more historic homes in the city, I chose this home because it still has some of the original features that the people we will learn about saw and touched as they lived their day-to-day lives. Tracing the home's ownership through time, the earliest property record is from 1882, where Josiah Barrows Thomas is recorded as owning the surrounding land. Josiah was a wholesale butcher and meat distributor who acquired a great deal of property in northeastern Massachusetts. In his will, he bequeathed hundreds of thousands of dollars to his heirs upon his death in 1898, and even donated $50,000 to the nearby city of Peabody to build a hospital in his name. Property records indicate that the home was built in 1885, but it is unclear as to when the house as it stands today was constructed. The home was transferred to Joseph and Emily Smith in 1895, and they may have built the home. Joseph was a real estate broker, which may explain why he and Emily only owned the property for 3 years. They sold it to Edward McGlone on April 4, 1898 for $1,000. Edward and his wife Catherine owned the home from 1898 to 1905. Edward was a grocer who immigrated from Ireland in 1882. They rented the home out to the O'Keefe family until 1901, when the family moved in with their 2 daughters, Marguerite and Gertrude. The house was then sold to Agnes Stewart on September 29, 1905, a widow who lived with her 6 children. We can see the family here a few years earlier in the 1900 census when they were renting the house right next door. We can also see the O'Keefe family who were renting this home at the time. Agnes's husband William died of cancer just 9 months earlier at the age of 45, leaving her with their 6 children. William worked as a courier for the leather factories, and I wonder if his cancer diagnosis was related to his work. This home is just blocks from the town of Peabody, which was once known as the leather capital of the world. In 1919, thousands of immigrants were employed at the 91 leather production facilities in the city. However, the environmental impacts of the production process quickly became an issue, with toxic chemicals entering the water supply. Also, more recent studies demonstrate an increased risk of various forms of cancer, including bladder and prostate, associated with working in the leather production industry. Fortunately for Agnes, 3 of her sons were of working age to help with household expenses while working at City Hall and the nearby leather factories, while the 3 youngest children, Agnes, Margaret, and Thomas, would have clambered through these halls on their way to school. The Stewart family only lived in the house for 4 years before selling it to David P. Condon in June of 1909. David was an Irish immigrant who worked at the nearby leather factories. He married his first wife Katie in November 1892, years before moving into the home. They welcomed their first son, David, on January 29, 1893. However, he died just 9 days later due to a premature birth. They went on to have a daughter, Agnes, in October 1895. Sadly, Katie passed away in 1898 from bronchitis, leaving her husband and young daughter. David remarried Julia Murphy on October 30, 1904, 5 years after welcoming their daughter, Mary, in 1899. I expect the births of David's children prior to or immediately following marriage may have been rather scandalous in his Irish Catholic community at the turn of the century. The Condon family lived in this home for over 30 years. It is easy to picture David returning from work at the leather factories, tired and drained, as he walks up these steps. Agnes and Mary would have spent their days playing together upstairs or outside as children. Julia would have been busy preparing meals in the kitchen. This is the place where they took refuge from World War I, the flu epidemic of 1918, and weathered the Great Depression. Agnes and Mary eventually married, although Agnes moved back into the home with her daughter Eleanor in 1930 while working in the cotton mills. David lived in this home until his passing in 1932. Julia, Agnes, and Agnes's daughter Eleanor continued living in the house until 1940. The Condons would have celebrated many birthdays and Christmases in this family room, although they were probably quite modest given their working-class lifestyle. The basement is where we can really see the age of the home, and it is probably the area that is most similar to how these families would have seen it 100 years ago, with exposed pipes and aging brick. For the families who called this home, this was the place where they rested their head at night and where they laughed and cried. It is where seasons passed and years faded into memories. Yet the sunlight still filters through the windows, just as it did for them so many years ago. Many of the families continue to live in Salem for many years. And as to the question of who haunts this house, I expect David Condon to be the most likely presence in the home given his long history, and since it may be where he took his last breath.